tell us, were you in Abu Dhabi this weekend when everything started happening?
Normal life, Abu Dhabi is great. Abu Dhabi has one of the best aerial protection in the world. The really air defense mechanism automated is really impressive. There's been about 800 missiles and drones, and none of them have gone through, except a few, like two of them in some places, but with very minor issues. So feeling very great about being in a country where the air defense system is one of the best in the world, and really grateful as well for what the future can bring to us in terms of peace, in terms of more freedom, and God bless the United States of America and the free people of Iran.
Thank you, Alex, for the input. Alex, can you tell us, please, since all of this was happening, and again, on Saturday, we had an impact on Bitcoin. Bitcoin went down to 62K, then now today we're at 69, so $7,000 per Bitcoin up from the low on Saturday. But again, jumping a little bit more into geopolitics, and because this looks like the year started very, let's say we had Venezuela, we had Iran now, we still have the Ukraine-Russia war. God knows, like, definitely if we continue on this rhythm, plenty of things will happen. And the important thing is that Bitcoin, as we were just saying, Bitcoin is the only true, completely liquid and global asset, market, currency, call it whatever you want, that truly trades on a 24/7 basis. And all the heat always comes to Bitcoin first. This is something that we've been seeing for the last few years. All the heat at this point from whatever happens in the world first has an impact on Bitcoin, always. And today, Bitcoin is basically the signal of what is going to happen when markets open and so on. And the funny thing is that everything that happens on a Saturday, which is normal, right? Or during weekends. Venezuela, it was a Saturday. Here, Iran, it was a Saturday. So how are you seeing in this point, and what is important from these events on this weekend and so on, and again, Bitcoin is going to get all the heat first of what happens in these next couple of weeks. How are people living it in Abu Dhabi and in the EMEA region? What are you seeing? What is, when you're on the ground, you get to feel and breathe more or less what's happening. So from Abu Dhabi, which again is like a completely different planet, but what is being breathed there? What is the input, the comments that we have? And I want to connect this again with Bitcoin and to understand what is the expectation of events in the region, to understand what is the expectation of, like, again, Bitcoin getting all the movement first of what happened, what is going on in the world.
Well, my first observation is that another way to look at it is, if you told people that there was going to be two major wars between the US and Venezuela and Iran and so on, and where would be Bitcoin 4 years ago, I'm not sure they would have said $60,000. And the fact of the matter is that with all of this, we are still 20x higher than the last 8 years ago, the last bottom 8 years ago. So in my view, that's providing a view of, with all of those uncertainties at global level, Bitcoin is actually holding pretty strong and acting as a form of, let's say, information before for everybody in the market. We could say, like, yes, this is about MSCI, and then yes, this is about Jane Street, and you continue down the list, and then you discover that there's been two wars. So my view is that in the market there is a lot of information about geopolitical situations and macroeconomic uncertainty, and Bitcoin is treated as a form of a new technology, and
Mhm.
as such is treated as a risk-on asset. And when the market anticipates macroeconomic uncertainty and geopolitical risk, today it goes back to gold and it sells off a bit of Bitcoin. And when we get back to a more risk-on scenario, and arguably if and when the US and its allies is able to stabilize the situation in Iran, it's quite possible as well that we get back to more predictability in terms of the geopolitical situation. For me, 2026 has been the most bullish year so far. You literally have the case of Ray Dalio being played out in real time, with the need for more wars to maintain the supremacy of global power.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that those wars are having a result, hopefully, of strengthening the power of the United States, which is the government and the
Mhm.
country that is the most in favor of property rights and the most in favor of freedom. And while Bitcoin is very apolitical,
Mhm.
its apoliticalness is very political as well, because it is the ultimate expression of property rights and the expression of individual freedom and economic freedom. And the fact that the country with the most respect for these values is winning is a win, definitely, for Bitcoiners and Bitcoin all around the world. And for me, what I see is the free world advancing, and that is very positive for Bitcoin. And the second thing is, locally, of course, people out there in Abu Dhabi are, of course, concerned about their families and so on. But at the same time, extremely grateful
Mhm.
for the safety that you can feel here. The life continues as normal. You don't see any difference really in the streets. There is Ramadan going on here, so there is a bit less people. That was already observable before. But of
Yes,
course, you have,
sorry, by the way, Ramadan Mubarak for everybody who's watching that may be enjoying this
yes,
sacred time for them.
yes. So yeah, I think there is no difference in the behavior of the people. People still do their normal activities. They go to the beach and they walk around. Effectively, it is sad to say, but in some ways, Europe has become less safe than the UAE, even in the current conditions.
Mhm.
And so you have a lot of issues in different countries, of course, but the UAE is really remarkable in its ability to maintain a strong power and order, whatever the conditions. And that's also really impressive from the allies across the regions. You know, I was looking at the most important oil producers or oil reserves in the world, and you go down the list and you see Venezuela, you see Saudi Arabia, and close enough you start to see Iran and in the UAE, and all of those countries are either becoming part of the US with Venezuela in some way, or being already allied with the US, with Saudi Arabia, and you know have Iran that is probably going to be more aligned with the US in the future. And you have all of the Gulf countries that can see very clearly on who are the types of allies they have. And I think all of this is very positive for the future stability of the Middle East region. And if you have a more stable Middle East region, I sense that you could have a very good scenario for Bitcoin to go back to very strong levels, to which it's already, but in a multiplied fashion. So I think it's very positive that we see Bitcoin getting back to doing Bitcoin things with plus 5% movements, and Bitcoin Treasury Companies doing Bitcoin Treasury Companies things up 9, 12% on our side today. So that's really really great to see how fast things move really in this world.
Actually, it's interesting and funny, funnily enough, but this is the first Monday in, I think that from maybe late last year, Alex, that we are actually on a green Monday. I don't know if you had paid attention to that detail, but guys,
Yeah.
we've been having Alex on since, I don't know, October, November last year, and every single Monday was a red Monday. Insane.
Riding the wave.
100%, yeah, paving the way, 100%.
I don't know if every single Monday, but this is definitely the best Monday we had in a very long time. So
I
that's
think it's very small compared to what we are going to have
of
in
course.
the future. We might have more months of consolidation and shops sideways and so on.
Yeah.
But overall, the structure has never been so bullish. Last week, there was Strategy World, and this was really impressive as well in terms of adoption. Every year, you see more and more banks, and now the top executives at the banks, together with the strategy teams and the Bitcoin Treasury companies, and you just see that this is going up and to the right in terms of direction. So hopefully that geopolitical situation gets resolved, and most importantly we get peace for a lot of the people living there, because I think that's quite difficult in every wars. Even if it's comfortable to pick a side and say that freedom advances, I think there is a lot of people struggling, of course, in the world. So let's hope for peace, and God bless the US and its allies and the free people of Iran.
Guys, I have two things. Alex, I will make you a question, and then the production team here is telling me that Donald Trump is speaking live. So once they get it, we're gonna see him just for a bit to see what he's saying, because it's very important, and this may actually affect Bitcoin as well. Alex, as the production team is putting this on, I have a question for you. How was the strategy week? Main takeaway, and stretch is killing it. What can you tell us?
The main takeaway is called STRC. It's really the emergence of an industry recognition of the success of Stretch and of the power of Stretch and of the adoption of Stretch. And it's really a big thing for the whole ecosystem. As strong as it was the success of strategy, the equity, and that brought forward the adoption of Bitcoin by more Bitcoin treasury companies. I think the big takeaway is that strategy concluded that the answer to Bitcoin for corporations is Stretch, and a lot of the Bitcoin adoption that we are going to see in the next 4 years is going to be driven by Stretch. And our objective, of course, at Capital B is replicating Stretch-like equivalent, potentially, of course, for the European market, and to bring that hyper Bitcoinization adoption over in Europe with a Stretch type instrument. Of course, might not be exactly the same, but that's definitely in our objective, as our objective is to deploy the strategy playbook in Europe. So congrats to strategy, and I think everybody recognized and recognizes that uh, Trump is speaking right now, and we should listen to him. Probably.
They are trying out. They are trying out. Alex, I have a big news for you, which is we're going to be listing, and for everybody actually, we're going to be listing Stretch very soon, and we're going to be paying out the monthly dividends in Bitcoin, guys. So anybody who's going to be wanting to stack sats by just having Stretch is going to be available 11%, 11.5%. They just increased the interest rates and payable in Bitcoin every month. Alex, we're also looking forward for the Capital B, right, preferred for the.
Well, of course, it might be slightly different. Of course, nothing is certain. This is public markets. But we've been very clear since the beginning that our objective is to deploy the strategy playbook at European scale. And the strategy playbook is stretched right now. And this has proven to be a very efficient way to drive Bitcoin adoption over the world. So yeah, I think that's really telling of what the future demand is going to be. Stretch is going to eat the world, and Stretch is going to contribute greatly to Bitcoin acquisition from strategy, and that is going to create effects in the market that people cannot really estimate right now.
100%. And what is going to cause an effect right now is Donald Trump, guys. So, okay, the team is ready. Please, let's put Donald and let's react live here with Alex. What's going on in the world? This is important news. And actually, we should also be watching what's the Bitcoin reaction, guys.
Doug Collins. Doug, thank you. You stand up, Doug. You're doing such a good job.
Okay.
92% approval rating. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, who's known as Raisin Kane. I liked him when I heard that name, Raisin Kane. I said, if it's true, you're my guy. And it's true. It's turned out it's very true. He's a great guy and a great general. Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, and Army Chief of Staff, Randy George. Thank you. Thank you both. Dan.
It's a round of saying
as well
thank you,
as
right?
Senators Tom Cotton, Bill Haggerty. You guys were great on television this weekend. I'll tell you what, can't have a better representative than both of you. Thank you very much. And Representatives Tim Burchett, Jack Bergman, and Nicole Malliotakis. So we have a few others sitting here, but I'm not going to go through it because we have far more important people to honor today. Oh, we have Tom Homan. I got to at least mention Tom Homan. I would be a stand-up, Tom. What a job.
Looks like a comedy, eh?
Zero people coming in. We had millions and millions of people pouring into our country now that, I mean, I'm not even sure I can believe this number is zero, but it is given out by Democrats. Democrats from the left, and they're rated for the last 9 months. We had zero people come illegally through our border. Right, Tom? So I want to thank you very much.
Okay, no more illegal immigration.
And I also want to salute 6 former Medal of Honor recipients: William Swenson, Jim McLuhan, Walter Marm, Thomas Paine, Sammy Davis. That's an interesting guy. Where is Sammy Davis? We have a big story here, Sammy. You've heard that all your life, I'll bet, huh? And Edward Byers. Stand up, please. You all look good. You all look good. We remember the ceremonies. Oh, great. It's a great honor. There's no greater. I tried for myself. I've tried numerous times to get one by myself. I keep getting shut down. They say, you can't do it, sir. Bad protocol. Very bad. I would say the worst. But I'm only kidding. You know, I have to say I'm only kidding. Otherwise, the press will come out with it, which they actually did once. Donald Trump wants a Congressional Medal of Honor, but he's been shut down. But now you are brave, amazing people. And I want to thank you all. In 1941, Roddy Edmonds of Knoxville, Tennessee, enlisted in the U.S. Army and soon rose to one of the youngest master sergeants in the military. In 1944, he sailed to Europe to fight in World War II, and he was so enthusiastic and young and full of vim and vigor.
Okay, here the team apparently is going to give us the
lines of the Battle of the Bulge. That was a big one.
Looks like the juice.
Massively outnumbered by enemy forces. His 1,200 soldier unit fought valiantly until they were completely overrun. The force was massive on the other side, many times the number. After a 4-day death march, one that was covered very well by the history books through bitter cold, they were put into a German POW camp.
Sorry, you were saying, Alex?
Yeah, did they say what it was about? Or?
Yeah. Now the team is going to pull on to the beginning.
On July 26th.
Okay, yeah. So now they're going to put us the beginning because it is that we were talking about our stretch. We were talking, like Donald Trump says, about our Bitcoins. We were talking about our Bitcoins while The juice was there, but yeah, he apparently said some important stuff regarding Iran. I'm connecting both topics. We've got today the Fed rates. What's the Fed rates right now? Fed rates now. We've got the Fed rates at 3.5%. Stretch is yielding 11.5%. SATA is yielding, is it 12.5?
12, yeah, I think 12 and a half, right?
Last week we were talking with Valen, Alex, and we were talking about what yield are you competing against in Europe. And Valen was telling us about the very low interest rates for the euro, which is your competition, right? So I have two questions there. Do you think that in these times of uncertainty, these kind of products are going to thrive, which is fixed income products, and nobody's going to want volatility? Or yes, I don't know. I would love to hear your opinion there. And then would love to also, in the meantime, ask you, again, what are you seeing in terms of competition between whatever you guys should work on and what there is on the market regarding preferred yield products in general?
Well, for me, the main takeaway, even from strategy, is that it's not only about the interest rate, it's about the distribution, it's about the access for individual investors, it's about the liquidity of the exchange on which it is listed. And this relates much more to the success of the product than the interest rate itself, even if, as you said, the European benchmark is like 2x lower than the US one. So in fact, you have a 2x advantage. But at the same time, you could have as well competition on the interest rate. So what matters is to have an attractive interest rate, but with, most importantly, a lot of accessibility and a lot of liquidity. And this needs to be structured very carefully and needs to be structured in the right way by the right team and the right company. And so that comes to the second important factor, in my view, is the trust in the company. So yes, you can have a very important interest rate, but the fact of the matter is, the Fed could be and the treasuries could be at 10%, and nobody would still buy them, because then you have the question of the issuer. So when I say nobody, I speak of Bitcoiners. And then, of course, the success of the stretch issuance is not only the type of product and is not only the interest rate, it's also the trust in strategy. And so Capital B is the most trusted player in Europe. And what will matter is our execution in terms of the structure and in terms of the distribution and the accessibility and liquidity over time. Of course, we don't have the size of strategy, but we have the same guiding principles, and we are extremely focused on replicating that model in the right way. So it might be slightly different, and we will, of course, do any adaptation needed for the European market. But I'm very bullish about France specifically, because it's, in terms of issuer, it's 40% of the European market. It's the number one country over in European markets. And European markets, in terms of demand, it's really reallocating a lot of, over time, of the demand towards the European-based companies. That is a trend that we observe. And I think that there will be a major local premium as well to those types of instruments, not only in terms of the locality of the instrument, but about the locality of the issuer itself. And in terms of distribution and liquidity, the largest investment banks and financial partners in Europe are as well, most of them in France. And you have as well in Germany, but France is really the major capital market in Europe. And it's quite interesting that Europe is even in terms of ranking above Asian market with Japan in terms of credit markets, just after the US. And so that tells a lot about the size of the market, but the market is very cautious when the size of the issuances is small. So we will have to build that step by step and to do it the right way together with our core investors.
Alex, what is the magic number to have preferreds? Like,
To do an issuance like Strategy and Strive have done, the magic number is to have an issuance of 200 million at minimum. The good news is that you don't necessarily need this for first issuance if you have strong investors that can participate as anchor in a deal. The bad news is it might take some time for the liquidity to build up, and at the same time, that's where a lot of the opportunity lies for a lot of investors. And if we are able to be the number one issuer of a stretch-like instrument over in Europe over time. And I insist, it's not only about issuing the first, it's not only about having one instrument or having one interest rate. It's a combination of elements of trust, good execution, and consistency that I think will make the difference. And we are going to continue with those same principles that have guided our strategy since the beginning. And those are to really be Bitcoin maximalists in capital markets and have that long-term view. And we have the balance sheet, we have the strongest investors, and I believe we will be able to consolidate our leadership over in Europe in the credit markets, but that will take quite some time. It's the opportunity of being an early stage strategy over in Europe. It took Strategy quite some time to get where they are.
yeah.
And we see that as the major opportunity. And yes, it can take a bit of time, but if we do it the right way, it will bring the most returns for our shareholders.
I have a quick question there, Alex. Like analyzing a little bit of strategy, which you very well like are very close to the movements there. Like, what would you say, or what do you expect Europeans, demand for instead of like Stretch launched in the US, right? And I think they already have an ETF right in Europe, and they also have STRE, right? So, like, what would you say is the strategy in Europe in general, or what would you do different, or maybe not different, as what the strategy's approach is to the European market in general? Because of course, Stretch has been a great, implementation in the US, but what do you think about the specific market in Europe and the dynamics there?
Well, one of the differences is that the legal structures that you may be able to use can change depending on the nationality of the issuer. So that might be a difference. Historically, that difference has benefited the company. For example, in order to do our Bitcoin denominated converts, we have gone through an SPV out of Luxembourg. And that initial difficulty to receive subscription in Bitcoin was actually a big advantage at the end to create a major innovation. And so it's quite similar in terms of preferred like, or more precisely perpetual type instruments in the credit markets. You might have different legal structures, but at the end you might end up with an instrument that provides a really important value proposition without really necessarily differentiating in terms of the risk-return profile of the instrument. So in terms of what Europeans are needing, Well, it's quite similar to the US. Do you want a 10% bank account? I think that's quite an easy pitch, and I think that a lot of investors across the world will relate to that. At the same time, this is, of course, the long-term strategy, but this is not the only lever for Capital B. We have so much pipeline opportunities that we have been developing and putting together and developing very strongly. And I think that our targets are very important for the development of the company, and I'm very confident that we will achieve them. And those imply doubling, tripling, multiplying by 10x and more the number of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And that's quite an important position to be in a continent that is extremely in need of Bitcoin securitized exposure. I think something that's quite different between the US and Europe is that in the US, you have tens of choices for investors. In Europe, the market is quite consolidated already. Capital B is the number one liquid Bitcoin Treasury Company in Europe. Nothing comes even close. And our role is to continue building on that leadership and developing that leadership both in the equity and the credit markets. And at every step of the way to being focused on increasing Bitcoin per share. When you look back from the start of the strategy, we have transformed the equivalent of 1.4 Bitcoin into 4.5 Bitcoin in terms of 100K investment into the for an investor. And that is my guiding principle, is to increase Bitcoin per share and to maximize that, yes, with the preferred type, perpetual type instruments. That is like the medium to long-term lever that the company will be able to develop, because that is ultimately what is the end goal, because you will be able to, in an automated fashion, raise capital over time. And at the same time, we have that amazing situation where it's difficult for a company like Strategy that has 700,000 Bitcoin to double or triple the Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I've been saying it for quite some time, of course, but it's been, of course, a bear market. But we have a lot of levers for Capital B to really accelerate its trajectory, comparable to what Metaplanet has done last year very successfully. And we would aim to replicate those types of patterns in terms of growth for the company. And France specifically has a lot of mechanisms in capital markets that are specific to the country that would allow Capital B to have a strategic advantage, on top of the additional liquidity that the French and European market have for companies that have a clear strategy.
Alex, I have one last question for you, and as we will have to receive our next guest, which is, I asked the same thing to Alan last time. It is, given the rates in Europe, why is not like the entire European market just buying Stretch or STRE as if it was the last day in their lives? Like, why are they not like just jumping over it?
Yeah, I will give one reason for the conservative and one reason for the bullish. The reason for the conservative is they just wait 3 years to do anything in capital markets. So until Stretch is 3 years, they will not touch it. That's not a judgment of value and so on. It's just that they are waiting along to see if it holds well and progresses. And on the bullish side, you have investors that want to allocate to Stretch-like instruments, but let's take Stretch, of course, as the main example. And today it trades 100 million plus a day. But that means that an order of 20 million, $30 million can actually have a slight impact on the market. So what this means is that it will take a bit of time for institutional players with deep pockets to allocate very important amounts of capital in the market, aside from IPOs. Because when you have the IPO, the issuance is at a slight discount and the institutions are just selling out until it goes to par. And when it's in the market, then the institutions are limited to the type of amount that they can allocate, being confident that they can get out without moving the market. So in my view, it will take about 3 years for Stretch to grow from 100 million of daily average volumes to 1 billion and more, actually. And at those levels, you will see institutions starting to allocate 50, 100 million without having any not issue, but concern in terms of the speed at which they can get back their money. So you have to keep in mind that this is a short-term type of use case for investors, and that they expect to gain 1% per month without having 1% of volatility. And I think the profile of Stretch is very telling in this bear market of being at par and of holding very strongly the line. And it will only grow in terms of strength and in terms of staying at par. And I think that's very positive for the ecosystem, because when companies like Capital B and others are going to replicate those types of strategies, then you will have a lot of, let's say, background for investors to see that these instruments work and that they are extremely efficient in the market. So that's why also I said this is a medium to long-term strategy, and that's why strategy is focused on it, is because this is the most transformative product for capital markets, and it will completely hit the credit markets in the world over time. And this will take quite some time, but the results will completely blow the minds out there, and it will be absolutely incredible to see the reflexive effect of Stretch on the accumulation of Bitcoin, on the ATM of strategy, and then back on Stretch, and so on, back to the other, of course, Bitcoin Treasury companies holding Bitcoin and launching their own products with the track record of strategy as an example.
Thank you so much, Alex. As always, congratulations on today's performance. Hope that you guys, that especially, keep safe. Send us any news and updates, and we'll be seeing you next time. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Bye-bye. So, guys, as you know, our always on guest,